Oh, miss! In this episode, we continue towards the first version of our balloon shooter game. It's time to shoot the arrow. Hi, my name is Rickard, and welcome to my channel and a new episode about Agile Game Development with Python and Pygame. In this episode, you will see me working on making the arrow shoot. So this episode also has a corresponding blog post, so check out the link in the description for that. Let's get into it. So what we have now is the balloon going back and forth, and we have the arrow. And what we would like to have happen is when we press the space key, the arrow should move in the direction it's pointing. So the first thing that I'd like to start with is to figure out what test to write. And we can do this sort of in two steps. The first step is to figure out how do we know when this story is complete? Like, what's the acceptance test for this story? And the second step is like, how do we actually write that test in code? And maybe we need additional tests as well. So for this story, I think the acceptance test is that when we have this screen, we press the space key, then we should see this arrow start flying across the screen. And if it does that, it indicates that we have fired it. And that's what this story is about. So let's see how we can write that test in code. So we have the tests for our balloon shooter here. So let's first try to write a description of this new behavior. So we can write something like the arrow moves when it is shot by pressing the space key. Maybe something like that. So how can we actually do this? Let's steal the test case above and make some modifications and see. So first of all, this should pass because it's the exact same test. Let's see if I can run tests here. Yes, they pass. So in this test, we're just rendering one frame here, and then we generate a close event which quits the game. So one thing that we need to do is to add an event here, which is the user press the space key event. That doesn't yet exist, so we have to create that one. Maybe we can comment all this out and we can figure out what we need to do. So we need to do something like game loop create event key down space. And the acceptance criteria was that when we press space, the arrow should start moving. So how can we observe in this test that the arrow starts moving? So we can see here that we have the draw circle events. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So in each frame we draw 4 circles. The first one is the balloon, and the other 3 are part of the arrow. So what we would like to see, like if we could filter out just this circle, if we can somehow identify it, like, and we can check the radius, like the small circle on the arrow with radius 10. We should see that is drawn in a different location next time. So it should not be drawn at 500, 500. It should be drawn somewhere else. Anywhere else is fine because it indicates movement. In this top level test, we're not that interested in details. Like, we don't care that much exactly how the arrow moves. We just want to check, does it move at all? And we could insert a couple of frames in between here as well, and then assert that it's drawn in at least a couple of different positions, something like that. So we'll need some kind of way to filter on events. So yeah, let's see where we should start. I think we should start with this key down thing, because if we just do this, let's see, like that will not work, because I can't see. Let's do it like that. Game loop has no attribute create event key down space. So yeah, let's see if we can fix that. Let's comment it out in the meantime. So we go to the game loop and we find the other one here. Create event user classes. So we wanted to have create event key down space. Let's just return or none. All right, and now we should be able to go back and comment this back again, and it should work. It's not testing anything useful yet, but it doesn't crash. So let's see if we can test this event as well. So let's copy the test here and say if we create event key down space, then is key down space should return true. So let's return an event. Pygame event Pygame key down, and I think when I experimented with this before, I think it's called key and Pygame K space. I think this is how you do it. Let's see. Event object has no attribute is key down space, so this might be correct. Let's see. Where's the event class? Here is key down space. So if the type is Pygame key down and Pygame event dot key is Pygame K space. All right. So to make sure this is done correctly, I would like to add to our game just to a manual test, saying if event is key down space, then print fire. So let's see if that works. So now I'm pressing enter key. Let's move this. Now I'm pressing the space. Yay, it works. Okay. So let's remove this one. Let's see. So where are we? We can now write a test where we simulate a key down event. And what should happen is let's see. Let's bring this all back. This will fail. We're getting a lot of different things. So one thing that we can do with events today, which is part of the event framework, is that we can filter on events. So we can filter all the draw circles event. Those are the only ones we're interested in. So we can remove the init and the clear screen from this test because we've filtered them out. But we also want to filter more deeply than what's possible today. Today we can only filter on the event type, but we would also like to filter on like event parameters. So perhaps we want to say filter all the draw circle events where the radius is 10, which is the small circle. And this fails because filter doesn't work with that argument. So let's see if we can work on that for a moment. Let's comment that out. And we go to events. And this one doesn't actually have any tests. It's just tested through the other code. Well, let's do something for filter. Saying I can filter on data fields. So we create events and we need to feed it something. So events modify foo and data A1, I don't know, A2. We can see that events is both of those events. All right, so we have, let's see if I can copy and paste these two. Like that. And we can say events.filter foo A1 should only give us this one. So first of all, let's include let's do this and call it fields. That should get rid of the first error. Yeah, but it doesn't actually do any filtering, and we still get this one. So let's see. Let's loop for field name, field value in fields items. So if field name in value in data, rather if data get field name is field value, or rather if it's not the field value, then there is no match. Let's try this. I might have taken a too big step there, so let's see. Let's try filter without this one, and we should get 2. Yes. So let's clean this up. Filter, so create some data. I can filter on data fields, and I can filter on event names, something like that. Test pass, I'm okay. Okay, so let's come back to this one. So now we have filtered all the draw circles with radius 10, and we should get, let's do this instead. We should get how many should we get? 4, 5? We should get 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is not a list. Okay, sure. This is something else. Let's count manually instead then. How many do we get? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So what we would like to do now is to check at the x and y coordinates and make sure that they are somehow different, because we want to check that this particular, now we've filtered the particular circle we're interested in, the circle which is the head of the arrow, and we want to assert that that one actually moves when we press the space key. So one thing that I came up with for these events is that you can write something like collect x and y. And this will collect the x and y fields of each event, put them in a tuple, and then return them as a list. So this doesn't yet exist. And we can write a test for that. But this is what I want to do. Let's comment this out. Back to green. And then we go back to events, and we add a collect method. And we call them fields. And let's write a test for them. So events, let's just steal what we have up here. And then if we do events.collect a, we should get a list of 1 and 2. Or rather a tuple with just one element, 1, 2. Let's see if we can make that pass. So we do, what should we call them? Items, empty list, return items for name, data, and self-events. Item is a list, and then for name in fields, we get the field and put it in item. So item, append, data, get, name, and then items, append, tuple. Item. Actually worked. So let's go back to the game and see what this actually looks like now. So now we have collected the x and y coordinates in a tuple. So this is where the head of the arrow is going to be drawn in each frame. And we can make some assertions on these positions to assert that it's actually moving. So one thing we can do is to say, we want to say that the length of this should be larger than 1. That should be true. That's the first thing we want to make sure, that it was actually, we had actually got some matches. So, and then we also want to assert that the length of the set of x is larger than 1. So set will filter out duplicates. And if it's the position is the same, it will be a duplicate. So this is the actual test for movement. So let's call, and this fails now, and this is actually the failure we want for this test. This is the real failure that we wanted to implement the actual movement. And one way to, let's just fix this in the quickest way possible, and then we can clean up the test a bit. So let's check for event is key down space. Then we do self dot arrow shoot. Shoot. It doesn't have a shoot method. Shoot. And I think to make this pass, we also need a y coordinate in a variable. So let's say it's 500. This is 500. All the other tests will pass, and if we shoot, let's say self dot y minus equal 1. All right, so now the top level test is passing. We faked it a bit. So let's see if we actually run it now. Oops. If we run it now and press the space key, actually, every time I press the space key, the head of the arrow will move 1 pixel higher up. So in the top level tests, we're only asserting that the arrow is moving. We're not checking exactly how it's moving. So maybe we can write some more specific tests for the arrow to check more exact movement. Let's see if we can make this a bit better. So first of all, these, I think we have tests for these things. So if I just change one, I want to see if this is tested. Yeah, so this coordinate is tested. So let's base them off of this instead. So this should be plus 20, right? And this should be plus 40. So now if we run the game, every time I press space, this thing will move all of it. And one thing that we could do is to, instead, we introduce a flag here, a self-shooting. And when we shoot, we say self-shooting is true, and in the tick we check if shooting, decremented. I think all the tests will still pass. All right. And now if we run it, and I press the space key, we'll fire away. Not very quickly now. So instead of decremented by 1, let's decrement by dt. Check the tests, they should still pass because we have movement and that's the only thing we're checking for. And now when I press space, so we did change quite a bit of behavior here with regards to how the arrow is moving without having any tests for it. Like the test is only testing that it's moving. And I think also if we set shooting to true from the beginning here, I think all the tests will pass. Okay, so now I ran the application instead, and you can see that the arrow fired immediately. If I run the tests, they all pass. So what's the problem here? The problem is that we're not checking for like the initial case. So I think we need to add some tests. So let's try to describe the arrow. So initially I stay still. So if we create an arrow, we tick it a few times. And we get the Y, initial Y, tick it a few times, and then say initial Y is arrow, not Y. And that should be true. And it's false, because we did this. Let's change this to false. And now this is true. Right, maybe this should say I stay still until if I've not been shot, not been fired. So I'm not entirely happy with this test because we're accessing this Y. And maybe that's okay, maybe it's not. Should this Y be considered an internal to this arrow? I don't know. But I think this text still makes sense. This like description of the behavior makes sense. Maybe this test is not as clean as I would like it to be, and not quite sure how to make it any better yet. I mean, we could call the draw function, pass in some kind of loop, and observe that it draws circles, but it feels like a lot of overhead. I would like to write this test something like this on a lower level. The arrow now moves when we press the space key. It actually feels like we're shooting the arrow, and it starts to feel like this is a real game now. This is very exciting. But it's a bummer that you have to restart the game every time you want to play again. You just have one shot. So one thing that feels important to work on next is some kind of reset when the arrow goes outside the screen, so you can play again without having to restart the game. And then next after that, maybe some kind of collision detection with the balloon, so you can actually score some points if you hit the balloon. And all of these things need test, of course, so we should probably also get comfortable with our test setup and work a bit on that before we move forward. But that's for the next episode. See you then.